Today, we're going to be restoring and upgrading this old yellowed WonderSwan. Very few people ever talk about the WonderSwan, and that's a shame because I think it's a brilliant device with some hidden gem games. This one is the Swan Crystal, which is the last version of the console they released and also the most expensive. But due to the condition that this one's in, I picked it up for £32, which is about 1/3 of the going rate. It has a few issues besides the yellowing. A battery has leaked inside and the screen is burnt. Oh, and it doesn't work. So in this video, we're going to restore the condition of the console and give it some much needed upgrades. Let's begin. So the screws on the WonderSwan are Torx screws. These are not common in these older devices, but luckily this screwdriver kit has the correct bit. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all 6 of those. With those all removed, we can now lift off the back. If you're doing this yourself, you've got to be careful because there are 3 clips at the bottom holding it together. Once that's off, we can see inside the WonderSwan. I'm going to start by removing the screen's ribbon cable. I'm going to very gently just lift up the latches with this pry tool, and then we can go ahead and pull it out. There's no screws holding the motherboard down, so we can just lift that right off. My first impressions of this board is that it's in pretty good condition, which is a huge relief. There's some sort of a plastic ring around the speaker which seems to be crumbling apart, so we'll have to address this later. I believe this to be a dampener for the speaker to stop it from just sort of rattling around inside the shell. Around the buttons there's some black staining. We're definitely going to need to clean this off. That's come off from the underside of the button membrane, which from what I've read about the WonderSwan were not very high quality. So that's basically just rubbed off, and that can prevent the buttons from making a good contact. Now there's 2 sets of buttons on the side. That is actually so that you can play this in portrait as well. This was made for landscape and portrait gaming, which is really very innovative if you think about it. Now fortunately, the battery design of the WonderSwan has actually prevented any of the leaking getting onto the motherboard. If you remember from the shots at the beginning, there's a small piece that slides out for the battery to sit in. That can be interchanged with a rechargeable battery as well. But due to the way that that AA battery pack is assembled, no leaking has spread onto the motherboard. And I'll show you why that is when I take apart the battery compartment in a little bit. Now, if we take a look at the button membranes, you can see that there's some weird residue underneath it. I have no idea what that is, but we're going to need to clean that off because that is going to cause lots of different issues. It could also be one of the reasons why this wasn't powering on. Besides being a little bit dirty, they're in fairly good condition. Now, the rest of the buttons on the WonderSwan are fairly interesting. They have these small clear plastic caps which slide over the rubber membrane. I've not actually seen that before, but I really like it. The button caps have gone a bit yellow, so we'll have to see if we can reverse that later. The underside of these button pads don't appear to be in too bad condition, again indicating that this is probably not being used that much. Let's go ahead and remove the other buttons and check those all too. So with all of the buttons removed, let's go ahead and remove the screen. I like to gently twist the shell until I can get my thumb underneath the screen. The Swan Crystal had the best screen of all of the WonderSwans, which is a TFT display, but this is actually what we're going to be upgrading. We're not going to need the old plastic screen lens, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that. With the screen lens removed, we can see just how brown the shell has started to go. This is something I'm going to be addressing later. In order to clean the battery contacts properly, I'm going to attempt to disassemble this small little battery compartment. I shoved my pry tool underneath this little plastic piece and it popped right off. This also had some residue on it, so I'm assuming that the battery that was left in here has just left a thin film of residue on some of the components. With that removed, we can now remove the battery contact. This is what's taken the brunt of the damage. As you can see, it's caked in blue gunk as well as the shell itself, so we're going to need to give this all a thorough clean. Let's go ahead and remove the other side. And so that is the WonderSwan completely disassembled and laid out on my bench. And overall, I've got to say I'm pretty happy with the condition of this. £30 is an absolute bargain. So the first thing I'm going to do is give everything a bath in some hot soapy water inside my ultrasonic cleaner. Everything gets placed into this basket, including all of the buttons. The ultrasonic cleaner is going to remove all of the dirt and grime that has stuck inside the crevices of this device over the decades. In total, I left this in for probably about 20 minutes. After draining out the water, I could then put all of the parts on a towel and begin to scrub them all clean. Now we can begin our science experiment. I'm going to be using a process called Retrobrighting to reverse all of the yellowing on the shell and the buttons. I'm going to start by putting some tin foil around the outside of a plastic container. This is going to help bounce the UV light that is needed to retrobright around the inside of the tub. I put some tape around it and cut off the excess and peeled that all away. All of the components can then go inside the tub, and I'll fill it up with some 12% food grade hydrogen peroxide. This all then gets placed into a sealable bag. This will help prevent the fumes getting out and also the hydrogen peroxide evaporating. For the UV light, I'm going to be using this old nail lamp. The modern ones uses LEDs, whereas this one has the actual bulbs, which kick off a bit of heat. This does seem to help with the process. Lastly, I covered up the opening with some tin foil. Let's take a look at the result. So normally Retrobrighting doesn't work very well with coloured plastics, and as you can see, this one has basically just gone a much lighter blue. The back has worked extremely well, and I'm very happy with how it looks. Together, they look so much better. Although this front shell is probably now not the original colour it was supposed to be, it definitely looks better than being brown. The transparent buttons have also slightly improved. Overall, I'm just extremely happy with how this has all turned out. So now it's time to take a look at what we're going to be doing with this WonderSwan. This is the old screen, and as you can see, the polarizer has burnt. There's also some raised bubbles and some black spots. Luckily, China have made an IPS screen upgrade. I bought this on AliExpress for about £50. Let's take a look at what's included. Inside the bag are several different components, but they all look fairly familiar and in line with the other IPS upgrades I've done. This will require soldering. Now, the companies that make these mods don't manufacture the screens. They'll have found one that's come from another device that will actually work, but it is a bit bigger than the original screen inside the WonderSwan, which means we're going to have to chop up this shell. There's also a glass screen lens that's just going to finish this off really nicely. And so that is what your £50 gets you. I'm extremely excited to get to work on this. Now, the listing on AliExpress has this very long image, which is what I'm going to be using to install this mod. The first thing we need to do is chop up the shell. For this, I'm going to be using a blade and some flush cutters. There's various small little tabs of plastic that is all around the opening of the screen. We're going to need to chop off all of these. Over on the far side, we need to chop out quite a bit of plastic. I used my flush cutters to do the bulk of the work, and then I tidied it all up with the blade. After everything's chopped out, it should look a bit like this. I'm then going to sit down the double-sided screen adhesive. Once that's set down and aligned, I'll go ahead and remove the backing. Now it's time to stick the glass screen lens on. I am super impressed with the quality of this. It looks absolutely brilliant. Now everything's going to get a little bit of a light air dust, and then we can remove the protective film on the IPS display. That then gets set down into the shell, ensuring it's positioned towards the bottom right hand corner of the shell. Once it's all set down, we can stick some insulating film onto the back of the screen. It's now time to reseat all of the buttons, and as you can see, those plastic caps have actually come up very nicely. We need to remove this foam from the motherboard, as this is going to be too thick for everything to go together. Once that's removed, we can peel up the tape. Then I'm going to take some isopropyl alcohol and thoroughly clean the motherboard, ensuring to clean up all of the black marks around the button contacts. As I mentioned, this mod does require soldering. There are two wires that need to be soldered between the WonderSwan's PCB and the new board that comes with the screen. One wire gets soldered here, and the other one onto the other battery contact. With both of those soldered down, I can then clean up the area with some isopropyl alcohol. I then fed this wire through this small little hole. I'm not exactly sure why, but it just told me to do that. We can then place some insulating film right here on the motherboard. It's then time to solder those wires onto the board that came with the screen mod. Now before we close this up, I'm going to use some isopropyl alcohol on a cotton bud just to clean up the button membranes. As these are responsible for registering the button press, you need to make sure that they're nice and clean. Plus, as I mentioned, there was a weird sort of moisture that had left a film over all of the black graphite pads, so making sure that that's all clean is going to give this the best chance of being reliable and consistent. Now let's connect up all the ribbon cables. This one here is for the IPS display, and the one at the top is for the ribbon that gets plugged into the WonderSwan. I can then secure the board down with some of the included double-sided tape and stick it to the back of the screen. These two little wires that are coming out are to access the screen's menu system. So I'm going to go ahead and stick those at the top of the WonderSwan out of the way from accidentally pressing them. Now, if you remember at the start, the rubber dampener surrounding the speaker had crumbled apart, so I'm going to be using this rubber O-ring instead. It should work a charm. I can then set down the motherboard. This is a small little latch for the battery to stop it from pulling out. I'm then going to tuck all of the wires just at the bottom underneath the motherboard. And the final thing to do is connect up the ribbon cable. Let's go ahead and put all of the screws back in. Now, I discovered that AliExpress actually sell replacements of these battery contacts, so just for the sake of it, I'm going to go ahead and order those. To make this be 100% reliable again, you would need to replate it, which obviously I'm not going to do. They're about £3 to replace on AliExpress, but this should be good enough to get it working. The other one was absolutely fine, but the kit does come with both of the contacts. Let's go ahead and fit everything back into the battery pack. I didn't retrobright these parts, so you can see there's actually a slight difference in the shade, but it doesn't matter too much. Let's go ahead and sit a battery back into the pack and connect that back to the WonderSwan. Now, in order to turn the WonderSwan on, you actually need a game in the back. Not many people know this, but there was a version of Tetris for the WonderSwan that's absolutely brilliant. Let's see if this thing works. Would you look at that? That looks absolutely stunning. You access the menu by pressing both of the touch sensors together, and then you can go through all of the different settings. There's 15 different levels of brightness, and then if you hold the top right, you go over to the color. That's because there is actually black and white games for the WonderSwan, so that you can add a bit of a color palette to them. The next one along is for the pixel, if you want to change the look of the screen entirely. I personally just prefer the clear one. And then the last one is something to do with frame rate. I don't really know, but it doesn't seem to make much of a difference from what I can tell. And there we go. Just look at how crisp that image is. So there we have it. A fully restored and upgraded Swan Crystal. I am so pleased with how this has turned out. I think it looks absolutely brilliant, and this is going to be my new little partner in crime, so I can give this the love it deserves. Interestingly, the guy behind the GameBoy, Gunpai Yokoi, actually left Nintendo and worked on the original WonderSwan. So there's no wonder it's so brilliant. There's also a great game called Gunpai. I did have that at one point, but it's a really interesting little game. Besides Tetris, there's some other really brilliant games for this system, and although it's a Japan-only console, there's plenty of games which don't require Japanese to play. Obviously, Bubble Bobble is iconic, and remember, the black and white games lend themselves well to the color palettes on the screen mod. I've also had Buffer's Revolution for a while, and I now have a proper reason to give it a go. Perhaps one of the most important games for the system is Klonoa and the Moonlight Museum, a brilliant game with some fascinating mechanics. That's going to be it from me. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.